Good afternoon, everybody. This is Lee. And those of you who don't know me, I do a daily Wall Street Journal dissection. I take the paper newspaper that gets delivered to my driveway every morning, except Sunday, and I lay it on my desk and I circle great articles that I think a lot of other people would be interested in. So if you're not familiar with what I do, that's what I do. And it's just low key. I go through it, and hopefully my purpose is to increase your thinking skills. I want you to think about the news items and what they may mean to you, or what they may mean to our future generation, our future years, next 5, 10 years out. So think through the implications of the news and what it means. So the first article I thought was pretty neat. It talked about the Supreme Court and the battle that the Supreme Court's had over the years. And really, I titled it Supreme Court Advances, Legislation Retreats. And those of you that follow me on it on a regular basis know that I've been very critical about the legislature branch not doing its job. And so either we're pushing the rights of the presidency outside of their normal rights, or we're deferring it back over to the Supreme Court and said, you decide. And so this article says Supreme Court's deciding more questions of American life. And Congress has retreated, abdicating its own role. And so I think that's true in a lot of cases. What's really interesting with Ginsburg just dying, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader just dying, in 1992, she said this: suppose the court had not gone on Roe versus Wade to fashion a regime of blanketing the subject, a set of rules that displaced virtually every state laws then in force, would there have been the 20-year controversy we have witnessed? I thought that was pretty interesting. Again, you can see in Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the thought process is, why did this ever come to the court? We could have legislated this at the federal level, or let the states legislate it in the United States that we pretend we have. So I thought that was a pretty good statement from Ruth Bader. And I think sums up my thoughts on that. Legislators, do your job. Second article, I thought was interesting. So the question is, do you have a front porch in your house? And do you have a front porch with chairs? Can I sit out there with you? I'd love to do that. By the way, I love my front porch, and guys join me on my front porch for coffee, and I really enjoy that. They said, the article said, front porches are making a comeback. It's the only place you can feel like you are outside and inside at the same time. Out with the neighbors and alone reading a book. And it's so true for what I do. I'll take a book out there, or I'll take my laptop, or sometimes my phone. I'll go out there and do a little bit of work. And the neighbors walking the dogs always stop by and talk a little bit. And it's great. Some of them, I've got a guy that he'll stop walk his dog, comes up, takes a seat, and sits on the porch for half an hour. And I love that. So you get that. You don't get that. That same neighbor walking by my house, if I'm not on the front porch, won't come up and ring the doorbell and ask how I'm doing. It breaks down the barrier in the neighborhood, and I think it's a great thing, and I'm a fan of it. I even have a big sign, 4-inch by 2-foot sign above my porch that says "Welcome to the porch," and I got that as a present here recently. I hung that up there. So, article further said, they called the porch a social lubricant, a place that is a little yours, a little theirs. Isn't that funny how as soon as you're on the porch, that they can feel safe to say something to you? And sometimes it's just informal social thing, great weather and so on. In Phoenix, we're getting a little bit nicer weather now, so a little bit nicer weather to sit out on the porch. By the way, just odd statistics, 65% of U.S. homes are built with a porch, 65%. So, a suggestion to improve your life, go sit on the porch. Take a great book and improve your life. This extends a little bit upon the recent news, and if you watched me in the last few days, you would have seen me predict this. And so Governor Newsom in California dictated that we're going to have all California cars, all electric cars, new cars in California in the next 15 years or so. And so now all of a sudden some people are coming up saying, wait a minute, what about the grid? And this is something you would have heard from me a couple of days ago. Not because I'm so smart, just because I think these things out. And some of these people are saying what everybody wants them to say, but not thinking through what they're saying. So, and by the way, one analyst stated that the conversion to electric cars in California would increase electric demand by 25%. Now, if you were running a utility, electric utility, that's a huge increase, and would have to be looked at very, very closely. And that's been my argument all along is, okay, let's go do this, but let's go do it smart. How are we going to increase that? And by the way, that really, and this guy goes on to say, that's talking about increasing the grid, the distribution circuits down the streets and everything. So, so it's interesting you think about this in California. So you come home early evening, 6 o'clock or so, you come home, drive in your driveway, park in your garage, go in the house. Well, before you go in the house, you plug in your car to the electric grid to charge it overnight. And you turn your air conditioning on when you get in the house. And by the way, your solar panels now have peaked early in the afternoon when nobody wanted electricity. And now, when everybody wants it, the solar panels are petering out. The sun is going down. And now you're trying to charge your car and run your air conditioning. Replicate this millions of times across the state. So interesting, some people have looked at it and said, okay, maybe we use the leftover car battery as an energy source. So when you plug in at 6 o'clock until 11 o'clock at night, since we've dropped off on solar, we'll cheat and use your battery bank, right? Because everybody said that the issue with solar is we need to store it, right? We've got to store it to use it when we really need it. And so maybe they call that vehicle to grid. The industry technology term is vehicle to grid. So maybe all of these cars running around, maybe they will be energy storage, and you'll fluctuate that up and down depending on the time of day and where you are. So maybe after 11 at night, when everybody goes to bed, air conditioning demands have dropped off, then the vehicle will charge back up, ready to have a fully charged vehicle the next morning. Pretty interesting. By the way, another thing that comes up, and government better be ready to handle this. So California collects $8 billion a year from gas tax, and another $3 billion a year from the cap and trade. And this goes into roads and infrastructure, bridges and so on, right? And yes, high-speed rail in California, whatever they want to spend it on. So who's going to replace this? Where's it coming from on the electrical side? In fact, it's an issue now in many states, with California being up to 6% electric vehicles. Those guys don't pay for the roads, okay? So they don't pay the gas tax. So, will it be a charge you pay at the charging stations? Or will it be based on mileage charges? I tend to think the most fair way to do it is based on mileage charges. With all the computers and cars knowing how many miles it's gone, why not just report those miles? And that would be the most fair way. Use the highway more, you pay more taxes. Use it less. My motorhome that only goes out every 2 or 3 months at the most would pay very little because it doesn't have that much wear and tear on the highway. So we'll see. By the way, Musk is also predicting a battery shortage by 2022, and due to lack of supplies and some materials, by the way, raw materials too, difficult to get to. So a little bit more about electric car. We'll follow that through as we go through, I'm sure. Fourth article: IRS is trapping crypto cheats. So on the 1040 this year, right below your name and address, there'll be a question there, and it'll ask you something similar to this. Did you receive, send, exchange, sell any cryptocurrency? Just a yes or no box. Okay. So anytime you see a yes or no box, this is why, the legislators, when they do their hearings, right, they want everything boiled down to yes or no box. They got you. There's no soft answers. They got you. And the government, the IRS in this case, is going to get you. So you better not put no in there when you've made any transaction with a cryptocurrency. The government still considers cryptocurrency a real currency. So if you get any in exchange for a service, it's revenue. And so you have to account for that. By the way, this was similar to in 2009, if you remember, they added an offshore. Do you have any financial instruments in offshore entities? That drove revenue up, I think, by $12 billion or something the next year, because people knew that if they answered that question then correctly, that the follow-up questions were sure to come. And by the way, in tax law and tax court cases, juries side with IRS when taxpayers lie. So you catch the taxpayer in a lie, typically you're in a lot of trouble with a jury of your peers. So IRS is trapping crypto cheats. Article number 5, Korea and the virus. So we've seen a lot of things about, how did Korea do so well in managing the virus? And by the way, could we replicate that in the United States? And so Korea was twice as effective as the US or the UK in preventing infected infections from infected individuals from spreading the disease. Okay, so they really were twice as effective from saying once you get infected, you're not going to infect anybody else. So if you do that, you obviously limit the infections and the death very well. So how do they do it? And I put a bunch of bullet points down here. There's as I've always said on my program, these things aren't real easy. There's not just one magic bullet. So first of all, they had the history of the MERS that affected them tremendously in 2019. So they were better prepared, as most Asian countries were, because of proximity to China and the previous diseases that have affected the Asian region. So second of all, so they centralize control, and Korea works that way. They centralize it very well, and access to all cell phone data. So they tracked you right to where you were and made it public, by the way. And they forced isolation for anybody, even if you were mildly sick, they forced isolation on you. So they really did everything possible. And when you think of it, I drew a line there. They wanted well people on one side and sick people on the other side. And their whole, everything they did was to separate that too, and to keep those separated, to keep that disease from spreading. And maybe we've got some things to learn there, but I'll get back to how they did it. They also fast-track testing kits. I think the U.S. was, I know the U.S. was slow. We had an issue with bad testing kits early on. We would have been much better on it if they would have worked, but they fast-track testing kits. They had twice daily briefings, country level briefings, no lockdowns. And why do you say they had no lockdowns? Remember the separation? If you do the separation well and quickly identify those who are sick, and they had dormitories, big buildings they converted very quickly, instead of focusing on hospitalization, which was way down the line, right? They're already sick and they probably already infected a bunch of people. Then we worked on isolating them. We worked on building more hospitals. Really, they worked on isolation, by the way, paid the bill too. Everything was free. So there was no reason not to go into that isolation for financial reasons. And then, by the way, the leader, Moon, in South Korea, kept a low profile. He says people believe experts, they won't believe me. He wants to have trust in not the government, but in scientific experts. And so they did all of that to isolate the sick. Now, can you say, could we have done all that in the U.S.? No way. You've got to convince me, right? Is 320 million people, minus our children, I guess, that don't have cell phones, going to open their cell phones up and say, you bet, track me everywhere, know everywhere I go? The government? Right. That's not going to happen. And even the isolation, that even if you were sick, we're going to send you off to a state mandated dormitory. Think about how that would work in the U.S. That may be a challenge in our country. So be very careful. People compare country to country and say, well, this country did better than the U.S. So therefore, typically they point to the leader. And they ignore all the cultural issues that come with that leader. So you say Moon was a better leader in Korea? He almost did nothing. He stood back and let all the other work happen. And you're going to give him the credit? Okay. But and then you're not going to count the culture that allows Koreans to do something that Americans would find very difficult. In fact, mask wearing in Asia has been for years a very accepted practice. It's not here, and you can see the results. Do some people not wearing masks just to a freedom issue? Whether it works or not is another argument. Sixth article, and my last for today, basketball. So the issue in basketball, if you want to improve the game, you need open lanes and you need a clear shot. So it's interesting, all these years, and basketball is an old game. What was it, the guy that invented it, Nesmith, that put the peach basket, the bottom tore out up on the wall? So it's been around a long time. But, to succeed at basketball players do well when not guarded and making a shot. They can hit that 50, 60% of the time, right? So all these years, people have not figured out how to make that shot better. And in the last few years, you've seen some real creative ideas on how to do that. First of all, the James Harden step back shot. Now, who would have ever thought of this? The basketball, we all know the further away from the rim you get, the harder the shot is. Obviously, the three-point shot range. So who would have thought that says instead of shooting from 20 foot, I'll step back 2 foot and take a 22-foot shot? And nobody thought of that before until Harden and others. Harden really wasn't the inventor of that. But he's taken advantage of that big time. And but by the way, they get away from more of the defense, right? They create a cleaner shot when they do that. So the Euro step is the side step that was famous, came from Europe, and it's really going through the NBA right now, where you take that side step. And then, of course, Jokic is famous for what they call the somber stumble. And it's hard to describe. You just have to watch it. He's the player on the Denver Nuggets that's facing elimination tonight. 3-1. They've battled back from all of them previously in the NBA, but we'll see if they can make it tonight. But they're against the Lakers, a very good team. But he's able to get clearance. So So I think that's a reminder to all of us that a game or a process can be around forever, and you think somebody has done the best possible job at all the facets of the game for a long time, when in fact they haven't. And there's still things that you can be creative on and change the game. And by the way, uh, especially around the 3-point range, once the sidestep and step back has occurred, it's really changed the game dramatically. And you're able to come down from 20 points down and do a lot of different things. So there's a message on being creative in our life, even in areas where we think the best creative minds have already been there. So thanks again for watching today. Have a great weekend. I'll see you Monday, and appreciate your comments. Cheers.